Almost every major military failure is preceded by warnings. Not vague whispers, but clear, unmistakable signals, reconnaissance reports, logistical red flags, enemy movements that defy expectations. But hubris has a way of turning these warnings into noise. Dissent is framed as disloyalty. Caution is dismissed as pessimism. And those who raise concerns are simply ignored. Technology often makes this worse, creating a false sense of confidence. Advanced weapons give the illusion of total control, but war is never just a technical problem. It's a human one. When a flawed decision is made, pride takes over. Instead of adapting, leaders double down, committing more resources and risking more lives to prove their initial plan was right. The real lesson here isn't about individual blame. It's about how power can isolate leaders and replace curiosity with a dangerous certainty. The most powerful weapon isn't a missile or a tank, it's the willingness to listen. Almost every major military failure includes warnings. Not vague warnings, not interpretations made with the benefit of hindsight, but clear, unmistakable signals. Reconnaissance reports, logistical concerns, enemy movements that just don't fit the expected patterns. But hubris has a way of reframing these warnings as noise. Dissent is twisted into disloyalty. Caution is dismissed as pessimism. The very people who raise legitimate concerns are sidelined, or worse, completely ignored. At this stage, failure is no longer an accident waiting to happen. It is an outcome that is actively being protected by those in charge. Technology often deepens this hubris. Advanced weapons systems create a powerful illusion of control. The promise of precision fosters a dangerous belief in predictability, and the physical distance from the battlefield reduces the perceived risk. But war is not a technical problem to be solved with better gadgets. It is, and always will be, a deeply human one. No system, no matter how sophisticated, can eliminate uncertainty. No weapon can truly compensate for flawed assumptions. When technology is trusted more than sound judgment, leaders don't become more effective. They simply become less cautious. Once a flawed decision is made, another powerful force enters the equation: pride. Admitting a mistake threatens authority. Retreating threatens reputation. Adapting the plan feels like surrender. And so, leaders often double down. They commit more resources. They risk more lives. They spend more time and energy trying to prove that the original plan was sound all along. At this point, hubris is no longer just a character flaw. It has become official policy. The machine is set in motion, and it is very, very difficult to stop. But military hubris isn't really a story about villains or fools. It's about structure. It's about how power inevitably isolates decision-makers from reality. It's about how certainty replaces curiosity, shutting down the very questions that need to be asked. It's about how large organizations, by their very nature, can discourage the flexibility and adaptation that war demands. The true lesson here is not that leaders should hesitate or be indecisive, but that they must, above all, listen. They must create an environment where truth is valued more than agreement. This channel examines war through its failures, not to assign blame, but to understand the repeating patterns. Because the weapons change, the uniforms change, the technology changes. But hubris does not. This is military hubris. And this is how wars are lost. Every major military disaster begins the same way. Not with chaos, but with confidence. The commanders involved were not ignorant. They were not reckless. They were certain their plan would work. Certain the enemy would behave as expected. Certain that experience, rank, or technology would compensate for risk. History shows us something uncomfortable. The more convinced leaders become, the less adaptable they are, and adaptability is what war demands most. This is military hubris. Hubris is not arrogance in the ordinary sense. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. In military history, hubris appears as quiet certainty, as assumptions left unchallenged, as plans protected from criticism. Hubris thrives in organizations built on hierarchy, where obedience is rewarded and doubt is dangerous. The most catastrophic errors rarely come from bad intentions. They come from systems that confuse confidence with competence. Military institutions prize decisiveness. Indecision is seen as weakness. Hesitation is punished. But decisiveness without flexibility is fragility. Once a plan is approved, enormous pressure builds around it. Subordinates stop questioning. Contradictory intelligence is reinterpreted or ignored. Warning signs become inconveniences. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. Organizations call it staying the course. The danger is not that leaders lack information. It's that they believe they already understand enough. In war, plans are meant to serve objectives. But history shows plans often replace them. Once invested, plans acquire momentum of their own. Adjusting them feels like failure. Abandoning them feels like weakness. This is where hubris tightens its grip. Instead of asking, "Is this still working?" leaders ask, "How do we force it to work?" Reality becomes the problem, not the plan. The cost of this mindset is not abstract. It is measured in time lost, opportunities missed, and lives spent correcting errors that could have been avoided. In Part 2, we'll examine how confidence hardens into catastrophe and why modern armies, despite centuries of experience, continue to repeat the same mistakes. Almost every major military failure includes warnings, not vague warnings, not hindsight interpretations, clear signals, reconnaissance reports, logistical concerns, enemy movements that don't fit expectations. But hubris reframes warnings as noise. Dissent becomes disloyalty. Caution becomes pessimism. Those who raise concerns are sidelined or ignored. At this stage, failure is no longer accidental. It is being protected. Technology often deepens hubris. Advanced weapons create the illusion of control. Precision creates a belief in predictability. Distance reduces perceived risk. But war is not a technical problem. It is a human one. No system eliminates uncertainty. No weapon compensates for flawed assumptions. When technology is trusted more than judgment, leaders become less cautious, not more effective. Once a flawed decision is made, another force enters the equation: pride. Admitting error threatens authority. Retreat threatens reputation. Adaptation feels like surrender. So leaders double down. More resources are committed. More lives are risked. More time is spent proving the plan was sound. At this point, hubris is no longer a flaw, it is policy. Military hubris is not about villains or fools. It is about structure, about how power isolates decision-makers, about how certainty replaces curiosity, about how organizations discourage the very flexibility war requires. The lesson is not that leaders should hesitate, but that they must listen. This channel examines war through its failures, not to assign blame, but to understand patterns. Because weapons change, uniforms change, technology changes, but hubris does not. This is military hubris. And this is how wars are lost. If you find this analysis valuable, subscribe for more.